Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Illumineers Quest podcast, where we talk everything Lorcana. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jacob.
And thanks for coming on this journey with us. Okay, so today's, I haven't seen you this excited in a while for one of these.
Get hyped. It's the Floodborn episode. All about Floodborn. Everything Floodborn. Let's go.
Is that the title of this? The Floodborn episode?
Yes!
Okay, the Floodborn episode. So we are talking about Floodborn cards, obviously, which are the shift cards ability, or the cards with the ability shift. We're talking about some of the current cards meta. We're talking about a couple of the future cards I would imagine that they've announced. We're talking about a little bit of the lore I know you want to sprinkle in. And then lastly, kind of how that changes, you know what, I'm going to do the pun, kind of how those cards will shift the meta over time.
Absolutely. And we've got Rise of the Floodborn on the horizon, so we got to prepare for what's coming.
There's a lot coming with that for sure. So with that said, as always, please follow us on our YouTube channel at Illumineers Quest and catch all the things we have there. Click a little spoiler alert. We did actually get our pre-orders in for Rise of the Floodborn, so we will have more unboxings coming once those cards come out. You can also mention us on Twitter and ask comments there at Lorcana Pod. And the same for our email address. If you want to email us and shoot us a note there, you can at lorcanapod@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you are listening to this on YouTube, you can follow our audio version on Spotify, Apple, iheart podcasts, Pocket Casts, or any of the major podcast networks.
Absolutely.
Okay. No, we're actually filming a couple back-to-back here to get ahead in case we ever miss an episode. But so no new questions or comments from listeners this time. But that being said, if you do want to have any comments or questions featured on a future episode, please reach out and let us know.
Please. We enjoy all the questions.
I know, and a lot of the comments and stuff that we do get are really fun, and I love the interaction, and so genuinely, we would love it if you did. Okay, so getting into card of the week. I know you've got a couple, and I say a couple because he's too hyped for the Floodborn episode, so we've got a couple Floodborn options here, so give it a go.
This is a special event episode. This is a 2-hour special with special guests.
This is not a special 2-hour episode. We are not going for 2 hours. It will be manageable.
We've got Brad Pitt and Taylor Swift on the show. This is a special season holiday episode.
That is true. Travis Kelce's coming as well.
Yep.
Okay.
You know what time period we're in right now, then.
Get on. What's your cards? What's your cards? Let me hear.
So first one I'd like to touch on. This is a not as often played Floodborn. This is Hades, King of Olympus. It's got 6 strength, 8 cost, uninkable, 7 willpower, shift for 6, 1 quest for 1 lore, or you can do with this ability. This character gets +1 lore for each other villain character you have in play.
Villain deck?
This is the ultimate villain deck card. And I think it is going to be one that is going to be looked at after every chapter release. And I think at some point, this will be insane.
It very well could be a lot stronger in the future. I think the one nick against it is that it is uninkable, and its shift target is also uninkable.
So I hear where you're coming from, but I think that when there is a villain deck, this is such a crucial card that it's fine being inkable.
You're right. I just think you have to have a shift target that is inkable. So if you have a Hades and Amber at some point that is inkable, I mean, if you have both of them uninkable, then that's 8 cards right off the bat that are uninkable.
That's fair.
But no, I agree. I think this one being uninkable alone is fine. I think if you're going to plan on the shift target, then you need an inkable shift target.
That's fair. And again, that's something we could see down the line.
Could come.
And then the second one that I'd like to go to is Jasmine, Queen of Agrabah. And this is a 5 cost inkable, 2 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 2 lore, shifts for 3, and then she has ability Caretaker. When you play this character, whenever she quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from each of your characters. So I love this because you're doing what you're supposed to do to win the game, right? You're questing. But you get that heal factor off, which is not everywhere in Sapphire. I think there's only a few cards that heal in Sapphire.
Yep.
And so I think this is a really interesting card that we haven't seen a lot of yet. And I think this is definitely, if you have a deep challenger, maybe Reckless deck, like where you've got maybe it's a Ruby Sapphire, you got Maui and stuff. You could heal Maui with a card like Jasmine here, and continue to play him, while questing for 2 lore every turn. And I think it's really, really awesome.
I like it because you can heal the Maleficent card in the set, the Uninvited, that has 3 strength, 6 willpower, that quests for 3. So, if you shift on this on like turn 4 and then play Maleficent turn 5, and then you just have that healer out there that they have to deal with that just, like you said, quests and heals every turn. So you'd have to do, ideally 6 damage in one turn to just take her out. Because if you do 4... then you heal it for 2, then you're back to having to do a ton of damage to it. So yeah, I like it a lot. I think it does a passive job. Any card that has a passive ability that does 2 things at once is always going, and continuously does it, is always going to be super, super helpful.
Also, if you're bringing her in turn 3 with the shift, she has 5 willpower, so she's sticking on the board for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But overall, I think a really useful card, and one we might see more in the future of.
It's very possible for sure.
All right, now are we getting into the main?
No, you're forgetting our news here. We got to talk about our news real quick. We're a little bit of a side. We finally both went to League on the same night. We decided to play each other even because it had been that long since we've sat down and you and I played in person. We've played Pixelborn on and off a couple times, but it's just so different sitting across from each other and playing.
And I got schooled in one form of it and then schooled someone in another form. So
I know where you're going with this and I don't appreciate it.
Well, no, I needed it. So I play with my family at home, and I play it very casually. I'm not used to going to League. I've only done it twice before this last time. So I keep my cards like my inks mostly unexerted when I play a card.
You never exert your ink. You never unexert them. If you do exert them, you never unexert your cards.
That is true.
We were trying to build up your TCG manners, if you will.
And by the end of it, I was good.
Okay.
By the end
That's
of it. So I really appreciate it. Both Zach and someone else very helpful there, another player, helped me out. And taught me a few other quick tips to help me.
He was a master of the TCG. So
I really appreciated all of it. It was all constructive criticism, and I really enjoyed it.
But we played each other, and spoiler alert, I got destroyed.
That's where the schooling of me, I schooled someone.
That's why I said I don't appreciate it. I know where you're going with this, and I don't appreciate it.
Well, how would you call that then?
Okay.
What did I do?
Here's what. Let's give full context to the listeners here. How and why did you beat me?
Because of my Elsa card.
Your Elsa card.
Yeah, my 4 Elsas.
So you didn't borrow an Elsa from me before we left.
I don't think that was a crucial detail.
Was that pocket watch that you used to shift in and rush the Aladdin to do a 4-lore shift in game 3? Was that your card too?
It is now.
Okay. In all seriousness, Jake wanted to borrow some cards to fill out the Ruby Amethyst massive control deck. He borrowed those cards. I was happy to give them to him, and he destroyed me with them. So,
taste of your own medicine.
I was a little salty about it at the end of it, but it's all fun and games. I'm just glad we got to play again, because genuinely, that was the first time we played in, 3 weeks maybe?
Yeah.
In person?
Not in non-Pixelborn, yeah, for sure.
So it was fun, and I was glad we got to be there at the League again. You got your promo cards from the first set and from this set.
I did. I got Hey Hey and Mickey. I was excited about that.
You got Hey Hey and Mickey. I came in second for this. There's 3 legs of each league season. Came in second place for the second leg and got a pin. So pretty pumped about that.
The pins are awesome. I think we're all gunning for the Lorcana pin.
I want that Lorcana pin tremendously bad.
Which you are in contention for. I am not.
So yeah, so the way that the league works is the top 4 I think are guaranteed a Lorcana pin, and I think as it stands I'm in 4th.
Yes.
So I have to continue to go consistently. I have to wear my Mickey shirts because I learned later on that you get a point for wearing Disney shirts. I have a cool Mickey shirt that I'm going to wear every week now, and I'm going to do my darndest to get said pin.
Where I mean, I may or may not have to go through another route to get it, but it looks awesome.
It is a very cool one. But yeah, no, the main news. We went to League together finally. Oh, one other small topic here. How was the booster that you got from playing your 2 matches?
You mean that single booster pack I
The single booster. So again, the way that it works is you pay to go play that night at League, but they give you a booster. So you basically play for free, but you get a booster out of it. And so, what did you get from your booster?
So I got a Beast Legendary and a Bell Legendary.
He got a double legendary pack and stole the legendary out of my... He didn't steal the legendary out of my pack. I just didn't get a legendary. I have not gotten a single legendary from any of the packs I've opened after playing at League, and there's probably been 12 of them. So, yeah. I'm a little salty. Again.
I mean, I enjoyed the moment. It was fun for me. Everyone took photos of my cards. We all yelled.
Oh, it was crazy because right after Jake pulled his 2 legendaries, another person that was there pulled a double legendary pack. So 4 legendaries in 2 packs was insane. So genuinely, it was a fun to see that, to just be there because everybody was so hyped.
It was a good time, man. It was awesome.
It was cool.
So many legendaries being pulled. It was great.
Yeah, it was cool. And one of them was a foil legendary. Unfortunately for said person who pulled that, it was a Gantu. So,
of course it was, right? Of course it was.
But anyways, we had a great time at League this last week. It was fun. We got to play each other. We're moving on to the 3rd wave of Chapter 1 season within the League. So excited to keep going. But with that said, main topic time.
Floodborn.
Get into it for us. Okay, so Floodborn, we've kind of already said, and for anybody who doesn't know already, Floodborn, again, is the characters that have the shift ability. So they're the more or less some of the more powerful cards in the set in general. But there's also some lore behind them.
I mean, to me personally, Floodborn are like the marquee of Lorcana. Like when I think of Lorcana and the impact it has on the Disney universe, I think of these cool Floodborn takes. And really, it's a reimagining of characters.
Not only is it one of the most impactful card actions within the actual game, but yes, like the lore behind the game and the expansion of Disney, like that is definitely one of the bigger pieces there.
So overall we have a little bit of lore on the game as a whole.
We were supposed to be getting more soon with this set.
We are may or may not have been maybe a little promised, but we're waiting on it. But overall, basically, we know is that the other like Dreamborn and Storyborn, they are pulled into the universe by Illumineers, which is us. We are pulled into the universe as Illumineers, this Lorcana universe, and then we bring in these Disney characters from their stories. But Floodborn are pretty much a whole different ball game. They get, from what we know, they get pulled in from an external source and are created by that source.
Yep.
So we don't know. I'm sure, maybe, hopefully, we get into specifics down the line. But that, as far as much as we know, basically. There's a little bit more, but that's the main gist.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're supposed to get a little bit more details in this, but from what I've heard, like Chapter 3 is when we get like really like an explosion of lore dumped into the universe.
Which, I'm a big story guy, so I cannot wait for that. I'm going to dive right in.
I'm not as big as you are, but your excitement for that lore and for the story behind it has definitely got me on board as well. So
I mean, just seeing Chapter 2 called Rise of the Floodborn gets me instantly hyped for it. I think as of right now we have 5 Floodborn for Chapter 2, so we're already getting into it with that.
I think we have 6 even.
Do we have 6?
Yeah, continue on and I'll look it up, but
just for me, the Floodborn just brings so excitement. Like seeing Aladdin Heroic Outlaw, right? Like Aladdin kind of as a warrior a little bit. like with a sword and all that. Like that's just so cool to me and brings so much excitement. Like there's a mobile game called Disney Mirrorverse where it kind of takes a different like play on a certain character and they kind of elevate it and evolve it. To me, that's a little bit too far the way they do it over there. Some of them can be a bit silly, but Floodborn to me is perfect. Mostly all of them are. Like Hades, King of Olympus. That's kind of, spoiler alert for Hercules, but kind of what would have happened if Hades won,
Yeah.
And I think that is amazing to see overall, and I think that it just brings so much excitement and hype to me personally.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, you have the art direction, you have, like, the lore direction, you have the gameplay direction. I mean, Floodborn definitely adds the most expansive piece to this game we've seen thus far.
It not only is Disney Universe contributing to this, but Floodborn is contributing, I think, to the Disney Universe as a whole.
How crazy would it be if in the future we saw, like, an alternate universe, like, Floodborn movie for Heroic Outlaw Aladdin or something crazy like that?
If we had, like, a Disney short, classic Disney short based on a Floodborn story, I'd lose my mind. That'd be so cool.
That would be wild. Which, I mean, this has the potential to make that happen because I think as they build the lore, they might build some of those stories into it. But also, as big as this is becoming, they might want to bring some of those, new players into the rest of the Disney property. So,
and with other TCGs, they have avenues like anime and comic books and stuff like that. This Lorcana is yet to really find that avenue of storytelling, so it'd be really fun to see if that ever gets worked in.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think also with the Floodborn cards, again, we talk a lot about like the game aspects in this, obviously, and how that impacts it. And currently there's Rockstar Stitch is incredibly playable so far. Elsa Spirit of Winter is incredibly playable so far. Aladdin Heroic Outlaw is incredibly playable. The Aurora Dreaming Guardian has played a ton. The Jasmine that Jake already mentioned, the Queen of Agrabah. Don't see her a ton, but still see her some. Then you get Captain Hook, Thinking a Happy Thought. Don't see him a ton either, but I have definitely seen him 10 or 15 times. Giant Tink from Steel. You see her every single time you see a Steel deck. So I think, you're getting into a world where there's just going to be a ton of useful Floodborns, which is going to potentially, change the way the game is played.
And I think it's such a good feeling to be like, okay, here's my overall deck, but here's my 2 Floodborns. Here's where my whole deck really gets going, like my Ruby Amethyst, here's my Heroic Outlaw, and my Spirit of Winter. This is where my deck really shines. And that's, I think, to build your deck overall around a Floodborn is one of the best things.
Yeah, so, we kind of touched on this before we started recording on, like, just Floodborn in general and what our thoughts were, and neither one of us could really think of a deck that is in the meta or that has been super successful or that we've seen that doesn't have a Floodborn in it. I mean, I think maybe a couple of the Emerald like aggro decks don't, because the Genie Powers Unleashed isn't the super powerful Genie that everybody plays. I mean, most of the Genie that's played is the Genie on the Job that bounces a character back. And so Emerald's kind of the exception because they're so aggro.
Overall, Emerald did get kind of gypped with the Floodborn, I think. But
you say that, but looking towards the future, I wanted to touch on this one specifically, is the Mickey Mouse Artful Rogue. His Floodborn it's 7 uninkable, so again, there's a lot of uninkable in Emerald already, and so he's hard to get into people's decks. But he does have 6 strength, 5 willpower, shifts for 5. And his ability is whenever you play an action, chosen opposing character can't quest next turn. And as we've seen from the releases in Chapter 2 already, there's already 3 actions. 1 costs 1, 1 costs 3, and 1 costs 2.
And those are all in Emerald.
And so you're getting a lot of cheap Emerald actions that you can play. And so, as I already mentioned, the ones that hasn't gotten a lot of love from the Floodborn side is Emerald. But those cards could completely shift Emerald from an aggro-focused meta to more of a mid-game control, maybe even like a little bit of late-game control deck. Because you have the cards to really, 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 really stall out your opponent with Mickey, with Gothel. Jasper's more of an early game stall, but you have Jasper that keeps people from questing too. You have John Silver that obviously keeps people from questing with his reckless regards that he can put on to another card. So I think that while we don't have a ton of Emerald Floodborn now, I think that we will definitely see a lot more very soon.
I think it's a fair point.
Yeah, we have a couple of these that are not super usable. We'll touch on the Hades again for a second. It's not playable now, but again, as more cards are released, since it has a very distinct qualifier, being this character gets +1 for each other villain you play, the more villains that are released and the more villains that are playable makes this card better. And so it becomes more likely to be played later on down the line. I would say the same thing for like the Scar that doesn't get any love in Ruby, the Shameless Firebrand. He's an 8 cost uninkable, and he shifts for 6, and his ability is when you play this character, ready your characters with a cost 3 or less. They can't quest for the rest of this turn. So it's like a very expansive Fan the Flames or LeFou.
Yes.
But the problem I see with this one is that Ruby isn't an aggressive deck, so the opposite of Emerald. Like Ruby is a very late game control, power heavy with Aladdin, and then you have Maui that's 5 costs, that's a little bit later in the game played. You have the Stitch and Ruby that quests for 3 that I'm starting to see pop up more. So the point I'm trying to make is if they come in Ruby with like Minnie Mouse, for instance, who is she costs 4, so she doesn't get rated up, but she has a shift and can shift to more of an aggressive style for low cost characters, to where if you do get to later game where Scar becomes available, that he's a great way to finish out that game.
I think overall Scar Shameless Firebrand is a tease to what we're going to get with maybe some Ruby Hyenas down the line that are
very possible.
Cost 3 and 2 maybe.
I think that the potential for the card is there. I just think that the strategies that people have built around that ink type thus far don't allow it to be played. With
the Floodborn with all the Floodborn cards that are not used right now, there is high potential for these to be meta down the line for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think we've touched all these in like the news on previous episodes before, but just as I mentioned, there are 6 Floodborn so far. There's 1 in Amber, the Queen, Commanding Presence, shifts for 2, which is crazy because as of Chapter 1, we don't have anything that shifts near that low. I guess we have a couple in Sapphire that shifts for 3, but nothing that shifts for 2.
She drops down 3 ink for that, which is something we've never seen before in a Floodborn. So.
Yeah. So, and then a really crazy another Challenger ability card. So we in the last episode, we talked about the ability in Amber that lets you banish a character that was challenged that turn. Her ability, the Queen's, is whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -4 strength this turn, and chosen opposing character on your team gets +4 strength this turn. So that's another card then that allows you to challenge in on Amber that you wouldn't have been able to do before.
It's also a way that, like, this is a crazy thing that you can do. You can completely get rid of a card's strength. You can attack into that card
with 4 strength,
and you don't get damaged.
Yeah,
potentially, if you take maybe like 4 strength is all it has, and you get rid of it. So I think that's something we're going to see all the time, especially if you're able to shift for 2, which we don't know what is the other Queen card we'd be able to shift.
I haven't seen that yet, but
so that could play into it, but I think this is a absolutely huge meta changing card.
I think that could be a big one as well. So, and then we've talked a bunch about the Bell card. If you're into any of the leaks, I'm sure you've seen this one. The Bell Hidden Archer and Emerald also shifts for 3, like we see with Aurora the Guardian and Jasmine Queen of Agrabah and Sapphire currently. But her ability is whenever this character is challenged, the challenging character's player discards all the cards in their hand. And so again, with a lot of the shenanigans that Emerald has, with John Silver making people reckless, with the other item or the other action, the Beast is Mine, and Emerald, that also makes people reckless. You know, if you play this and then make someone reckless into you, they have to discard their whole hand. Which, if you're playing, you know, a Ruby Amethyst deck like yours that likes to draw a lot of cards and have a lot of options, that gets rid of all those options.
I mean, I think the potential for the Bell Hidden Archer is easy to see.
Yeah, it's also legend. It's also one of the legendaries in the set. It is uninkable, so that's a little against it, or has a little check against it. But I think that will be a strong one too. Touched on Minnie already, kind of talking about the Ruby, but the Minnie Mouse Wide-Eyed Diver is a 4-cost shift 2 as well. The difference here is that she is evasive, and so she's going to be like the cheapest, quickest evasive character you can get out. 2 strength through willpower, but we're kind of not sold on her yet because she quests for 1, and and to activate her ability is a really high bar to go over, which is whenever you play a second action in a turn, this character gets +2 lore. So it's a great ability, but it's just really, I mean, how often do you play 2 actions in one turn? Like, there would have to be a lot of cheap actions to go after to make that worthwhile.
Now, we could be getting into what we talked about, the teams, because that works with the Mickey Mouse Artful Rogue. So
that is true.
We could be seeing a Fab 5, Fab 6 team being built here.
If I would love to play an Emerald, Ruby, item heavy deck with Mickey and Minnie, where she's evasive, so she's your quester. You have Mickey late game to stop all of everybody from questing on their turn. So I think there is potential there for sure. But as it stands now, without understanding the rest of the cards, I'm not sold on Minnie yet. Cogsworth, on the other hand, one of the 2 Sapphire ones we've seen thus far, the Cogsworth Grandfather Clock, has a shift 3. He has ward, so opponents can't directly deal damage to him like a Cusco. But his ability is resist, or your other characters gain resist +1. So kind of like Aurora, Dreaming Guardian, but for resist.
I mean, it's got that 5 willpower, it's got that 2 strength, 2 lore. It's inkable for 5. I mean, all those stats around it. Just overall, I think it's going to be a great card. I just think it's easy to say, especially if you get this out for 3 for shift.
You shift this on turn 3, and then you're playing a steel deck where they want to shift on Tink in turn 4. Tink's passive of dealing 1 damage to everybody when she comes into play is useless.
This is mind-boggling to me. Like, I get it. It's only resist 1. But this is all your cards. And especially if you're able to... Did I say that right? Resist +1?
Yeah.
Especially if you're able to work in the Floodborn Aurora onto this as well.
To then give all of your characters ward. I mean... there's a lot of potential with this one. I would love to see some Sapphire decks with him. And then there is the other Sapphire card, Gaston, the intellectual powerhouse in Sapphire. He's a 6-cost uninkable, shifts 4, quests for 3, so a massive powerhouse quester, along with being an intellectual powerhouse. But his ability is when you play this character, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may put 1 into your hand, put the rest to the bottom of your deck. So you get to look at 3 cards, put 1 in your hand, so he replaces himself, and then you get to kind of shift through to get to the cards that you want, like an amber, like a couple cards in amber that you get to do now, like the Be Our Guest, a song that's currently in amber that I know is played a lot.
I think that there's a lot of fun to be had with this. I don't think it's necessarily fits into my play style. But like it's just fun. Like making Gaston a genius is hilarious. I think it's overall fun idea to play with. But
shift 4, quest for 3. I mean, that alone makes it interesting.
And I think that's a good point to be had. I just think that there are, if you're playing Sapphire to quest, that isn't. I would rather play Emerald. I see what you're saying. Definitely, I just think that doesn't fit into my playstyle.
No, I agree. It's probably not one that I would specifically play, but I do see where it could be really strong. But lastly, as we just kind of talk through some of these, we get to the giant Cinderella, as I've dubbed her, because she goes along with the giant Tink. But Cinderella, South-Hearted, is probably top 2 or 3 of my favorite cards thus far. She's a 7-cost, shift 5, resist +2. So pair her with Cogsworth, you have resist +3, which would be just too much to think about. But her ability is whenever you play a song, this character may challenge ready characters this turn. So if their ink's drying, or I guess not if their ink's drying, but if they weren't questing and you want to challenge them because they were trying to save them from being banished, then you can just banish into them.
That can go challenge ready, like drying cards. I think so for sure, right?
I don't know. I guess are drying cards ready?
I would say they can.
Somebody correct me there. I guess I could be wrong, but
I mean, I could be wrong. But again, like with the Cogsworth, all the stats around it make it even better. Like you get 7 cost, inkable, 5 strength, 5 willpower, 3 lore,
resist +2, +2.
All of that makes this an outstanding card.
Yep.
I'd play this if it was uninkable, but it makes it even better card if that it is inkable. To me, there is not a downside to this card.
Not that I can see, that's for sure. I mean, like I said, it's one of my favorites. But yeah, so the point I think we're trying to make of just going back over all those is that there's a lot of excitement around the Floodborn characters to come. Like I see potential in every single one of them. And so, there's the option I think you have to play all of these if you wanted to.
Usually when a Floodborn is introduced, that creates a whole new deck type. And that is the Floodborn shtick. That's what it's all about, and that's why I love it.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, most, if not, aside from the Emerald, really aggro decks, I struggle to find another example that doesn't have a Floodborn in there. You have the Steel Song, the Steel Amber Song deck that has Giant Tink, that some versions also have Surfer Stitch. You have the Ruby Amethyst Control, which has Elsa and Heroic Outlaw.
Did you just say Surfer Stitch is a Floodborn?
Did I say no? Did I say Surfer Stitch or did I say?
What did you mean?
Stitch?
If you meant
Rockstar Stitch,
okay.
I meant Rockstar
okay,
Stitch.
okay.
And you have Rockstar Stitch and Giant Tink. On the Ruby Amethyst Control decks, you've got Aladdin and Elsa. On the Sapphire decks, you've got the Aurora Dreaming Guardian. On the other, like I said, there's a couple other Ruby evasive decks where you've got Aladdin Heroic Outlaw on. You've got, like I said, Surfer Stitch. I did that time you were in my head. You've got Rockstar Stitch, and most every Amber deck. I've also played quite a few Facilier centric decks where the whole idea is to bounce cards and put them back in your hand and keep your hand full that way. So Facilier we didn't touch on, but he's also a pretty strong one. And then obviously the Tink one is the main one from Steel, but the Hook I've seen played a few times too. And so there's a strong meta around those now, and the cards, to your point, all kind of century around that main Floodborn. And so this was the main topic that I wanted to touch on in this episode but how does the addition of a lot more Floodborn cards change the way the game is played, like in general? And the comment I'll make, and then I'll give you the floor, is, you already mentioned that there's usually a big character that you're building to, whether that be Aladdin. You have the Street Rat on the board to be a really big threat, not because of the card itself, but because of what can happen to it. You can shift onto it, and that's a massive threat. You have the Baby Stitch that you can shift Rockstar Stitch onto. Got it right that time. Which is also a massive threat because then you can get a lot of card draw off of it. He also quests for 3. Same thing with Baby and Giant Tink. You're going to deal a ton of damage if Giant Tink comes on the board. So the point I'm trying to make is when those cards come on, they're a huge distraction for your opponent. But when the release of Chapter 2, and even further down the line with Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, there will be so many Floodborn options that will there always be a shift option for even the small cards then that you're playing?
I mean, it's definitely a possibility. They have to. I think that's one thing to keep in mind is, and maybe this is the concept, but is the point of a Floodborn, is that to be special? Is there only a few in every deck? Is that the point? Or, as in the name Floodborn, is it to flood your opponent with them? Is it to overwhelm your opponent with the amount of Floodborns you have and the pace they're coming at you at?
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a very good point. I mean, in the way that I see it is it could go two ways. Either one, you get to a point where every single card that you play early game does have a shift target, and so all of them are threats, and you don't know which shift targets your opponent has, and so you're worried about taking them all out. Or two, you get to a place where all of the shift targets are so, I don't know the best way to put it, but like unimportant that it doesn't really matter. You know, like a lot of the shift targets today, I think outside of like Aladdin Street Rat, are pretty just vanilla cards, and so they're not really a big threat on their own. And so maybe they like even scale those back a little bit more where they're even weaker as the shift targets, and then it becomes hard to get any of those shifted cards out there because they're always being taken out. Regardless, I think when you have, 5 or 6 shift options per ink type, it will become very interesting to see the amount of shift people put in their decks.
And I think that's only something we can really take into full account as new chapters come on.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
It's going to be really exciting to see how Floodborn evolves, but overall how the game evolves.
Yeah, I think that Floodborn could be like the engine that does evolve the game, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because if it does get to a point where Floodborn is so powerful that everybody's playing Floodborn, then that's the engine that's driving the change in the game.
And I think it is already doing that to a certain extent, which is crazy. And it's only going to get more from here on out. And I think that's where my overall hype and excitement comes from. I just think overall it's a great concept, and overall it's been executed really well.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of the most, and if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was our like most powerful, like top tier on the ability rankings.
Did we put Floodborn on the ability, or are you talking about Shift?
No, Shift. Like Shift, Floodborn, Shift.
I do think it was pretty high up there.
I'm pretty sure it was 1. I could be wrong, and it might be 2. But the point is like this is the most important like mechanic of the game as it stands today. And as you mentioned, Chapter 2 being called Rise of the Floodborn, and then bringing out a ton more Floodborn characters, I stand to reason that this is going to continue to be one of the most important pieces of the game. And so when you have that many, cards that could be shift targets, it makes it much harder to read your opponent. Like today, a lot of the small cards that you play in Amber are, you play Stitch, you play Simba, you play Lilo, you play maybe like, I don't know, Maximus, or like, a very solid number of like turns 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
What if every single one of those cards had a shift target? I mean, then it's like, which of those is the actual threat that you need to take off the board?
And that's where it gets nutty.
Yeah, because today it's like, okay, I need to get Simba off the board so that I can get Stitch off the board.
Mm-hmm.
But if Simba and Stitch and Lilo all have shift targets, maybe as an opponent you don't have all 3 of the shifted cards in your deck, but your opponent doesn't know that, and so to them all of those are a massive threat, and so they have to like overextend themselves to take all those cards out. That's the way that I see it, at least. Again, I'm a noob, what do I know? But to me that's extremely intriguing, of like a deception style of play.
Like your opponent can play a wardrobe and all of a sudden it shifts onto the big Floodborn wardrobe and just wipes your board.
For context, there's not a Floodborn wardrobe. Jake is just campaigning for it to happen sooner rather than later.
I mean, could you imagine all the clothes she can just shoot out at you, man? That's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, you're right. But who wants a Floodborn wardrobe?
I do. I'm pushing for it.
You're right. Forget Floodborn, I don't know, like Hercules, when you can have a Floodborn wardrobe.
I mean, I definitely take the Floodborn Hercules, but if we get wardrobe on the side.
Okay, let's stick to our bases here. Let's get Floodborn Pascal before we get Floodborn wardrobe.
I love Pascal as he is. A Floodborn wardrobe. Let's go. That's my next push.
All right. Floodborn Wardrobe 2024 campaign started here today. You heard it here first.
I've hinted at it a few times, but we're starting it now.
Okay, any final thoughts?
I love this. I just love... I mentioned it multiple times here on this episode. It gets me so excited to talk about Floodborn. I just think it's the kind of the bread and butter of this game, and I cannot wait to see more.
Yeah, I think I covered it all for me too. I mean, again, I've said it, but I just want to reiterate. I mean, the biggest thing to me is what does having 6 or 8 shift targets per ink type do to the game? Because again, I'm not saying that will break the game. I'm saying I don't think it will be very or near as easy to read your opponent and what their intentions are and what they're building to in their deck, because again, they could have 3 or 4 cards in their deck that they play early that all could be shift targets, and you don't know which ones to go after. And so it just makes it very interesting and much more of a deception game, and will really change the way that you have to like kind of bait out cards from your opponent without overextending, so that you don't get blown out of the water because they shift on something that you didn't expect.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's really intriguing. I think as we continue to see this unfold with sets 2, 3, and beyond, we will really start to understand where they're going to take the game longer term.
I think Floodborn is the main engine of where the game's going.
Agree. I think this is what really makes it interesting and different from a lore perspective, like we already talked about, from a mechanics perspective that you've definitely seen if you've played the game, from a deception perspective, like I've just touched on. So I think it just has a lot of potential to really move the game forward.
I totally agree.
Okay. Again, everyone, we couldn't be more appreciative for you listening, and thanks for all the support. If you have any comments or questions, please shoot them our way, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
As always, thanks.